This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/CinemaTyler.
He had one actor do 2 days worth of takes, and on a megaphone would say, it's take 72. That's just no fucking good. Let's go to take 73. You know.
And no attempt to be funny, let's be clear. As funny as it is to hear it now.
No attempt to be
No
funny.
one was laughing on that set.
So you had to come up with the goods or you were not going to have a good time.
We've heard similar stories about Kubrick's methods before. George C. Scott was tricked into overacting in Dr. Strangelove by saying that those were rehearsal takes that wouldn't be in the final film. The Ludovico treatment scenes in A Clockwork Orange left Malcolm McDowell with scratched corneas. Shelley Duvall had a nervous breakdown on the set of The Shining, and Tom Cruise suffered an ulcer during the 46-week straight production of Eyes Wide Shut. At one point in the Full Metal Jacket production, Matthew Modine's pregnant wife went into early labor and needed an emergency C-section. Kubrick didn't think Modine should go to the hospital with his wife, and instead continue working because they would have nothing to shoot after lunch, and the doctors wouldn't need him there anyway. Modine threatened to cut his hand and force them to stop filming if Kubrick didn't agree to him leaving. Hearing this, I can't help but think of that moment in Platoon, when a soldier comes out of an intense battle unscathed and stabs himself in the leg before he's found so that he can get on the injured list. In many of these cases, you could argue that the end justified the means. After all, Kubrick had two reputations: having unorthodox methods and making some of the greatest movies in the history of cinema.
And I resented him for it. I thought, why do you want to do this to me? How can you do this to me? You know, you agonize over it. And it's just the necessary turmoil to get out of it what you want out of it. I mean, we had the same end in mind. It was just that sometimes we differed in our means. And by the end, the means met.
And from the various casting anecdotes and actor interviews involving Kubrick's productions, it seemed that actors from all over were jumping at the chance to work with Kubrick despite these infamous stories. During the promotion of Full Metal Jacket, Dorian Harewood, who played 8-Ball in the movie, complimented Kubrick's methods, calling him a perfectionist. Kubrick heard about this and immediately called Harewood to tell him, "I'm not a perfectionist." Kubrick addressed the label of perfectionist in an interview with Michel Ciment. He said, "Perfectionism is a convenient journalistic slant used to get at me. If you try to do something, you try to do it as well as possible. I don't waste money and I don't waste time, but I try to get it right. My films don't cost a lot, and they've all been successful. No company has ever been hurt by any of them, and some of them have made a lot of money." Nevertheless, Kubrick's reputation for having actors do take after take after take has endured. So let's look at why Kubrick used this method specifically from the lens of Full Metal Jacket. This is why Kubrick did so many takes in Full Metal Jacket.
I gotta get back in the shit. I ain't heard a shot fired in anger in weeks.
When thinking of the amount of takes Kubrick would do, most think of something in the range of 100, like the infamous story of it taking 127 takes to shoot this scene in The Shining. But in actuality, aside from some specific shots or problems, Kubrick usually wouldn't go much further than 30 takes, but it really depended on the actor. Perhaps the main reason for this many takes was that some actors didn't know their lines the way Kubrick wanted. In an interview, Kubrick said, "You cannot act without knowing dialogue. If actors have to think about the words, they can't work on the emotion. So you end up doing 30 takes of something, and still you can see the concentration in their eyes. They don't know their lines. So you just shoot it and hope you can get something out of it in pieces."
We did 20 takes, and that was the best one.
Lee Ermey was an actor who really knew his lines. After all, he had lived the part in dialogue as a real gunnery sergeant during the Vietnam War, and he spent all of his spare time working with his dialogue coach on the movie. Kubrick said that Ermey averaged 8 or 9 takes, and sometimes got it in 3. Kubrick also suspected that some actors embellished their 30 takes to 100 takes in interviews, adding to his reputation as a perfectionist. Co-screenwriter Michael Herr said that some of the younger, less experienced actors, quote, had only the most rudimentary sense of what Stanley actually meant by knowing your lines, by which he meant that you had to know them so completely that there were no other possible lines anywhere in your head. He goes on to say, "They were a jolly enthusiastic crew, some very talented, some not, all thrilled to be in a Stanley Kubrick movie. I think they all saw blue skies and high times ahead. But there was a plateau of discipline that they couldn't have known existed before. Stanley showed them, and it hurt.
And he loved British actors because oftentimes American actors work on the characterization, the history, and the last thing that American actors usually taught in school is to go to the lines. And British actors, I think, on the other hand, use the lines to lead them to the same place that Americans arrive, but in a different direction. Start with the lines and find the character instead of finding the character and then go to the lines.
Kubrick once told Modine about when he was a relatively new director, directing some of England's greatest actors. He heard them whispering to each other, and they would stop when he got close. He thought that they were criticizing him, but when he managed to eavesdrop, he found that they were just rehearsing their lines over and over. So with some of the actors not knowing their lines in the way that Kubrick wanted, it would take longer to shoot the scenes. Especially for his later movies, Kubrick allocated an extensive number of shooting days for filming in the budget, so that he could take the required amount of time to get the quality of the story, camera work, and performances where he wanted them. In an interview, Kevin Major Howard noted that he was on the production for 17 months, which was 4 months longer than an actual Marines tour of duty in Vietnam. At one point, the union actors called a meeting because the production was not honoring its union requirements. Kubrick had kept them working long past overtime. Matthew Modine wrote in his Full Metal Jacket diary that he was so excited to be working for Kubrick that he didn't consider that the other actors weren't getting the perks that he got as a star. This isn't to say that Modine escaped the long hours. He was working longer than anyone, and in fact, one week, he agreed to come in to rehearse on his only day off so that the Vietnamese extras didn't have to lay in the cold dirt for too long. Full Metal Jacket editor Martin Hunter said, "Two things would absolutely enrage Kubrick. One was laziness. Not laziness as most people would think of it, but someone who only wanted to work 18 hours instead of 20 hours that day could arouse his wrath. And the other thing was deception. Cinematographer Douglas Milsom said, "I've actually had a lot harder time working for a lot less talented people than Stanley. He's a drain because he saps you dry, but he works damn hard himself and expects everybody else to." Kubrick put an extreme effort into making sure that every dollar wound up on the screen. If you did anything that would mess with his movie or his ability to enjoy the amount of time he needed to get his movie right, he would kill you. He did this on Full Metal Jacket. Dorian Harewood, who played 8-Ball, tried to renegotiate his fee when they were extending the actor contracts, and Kubrick had him killed. His character, I mean. This is a crazy story which we'll talk about in another episode. Another reason shooting took so long was because of the relationship Kubrick wanted the actors to have with their characters. And this meant that the casting had to be perfect. In the early 1980s, Hollywood was buzzing with the news that Stanley Kubrick was making a Vietnam War movie, and everyone wanted to be a part of it. Kubrick put out an ad in the paper saying that he was willing to look at anyone's audition tape. It seemed that every actor in America and England was sending in an audition. Kubrick told co-screenwriter Michael Herr, "Some of them are interesting. Most of them are terrible. Oh well, I suppose I can always wipe the tapes and use them to record football on."
Since I'm paying a great deal to say whatever I like to Stanley Kubrick, one of the greatest directors of all time, although not quite as good as Michael Curtiz, the director of The Seahawk. Stanley, why aren't you directing 2010?
Underneath.
According to Herr, Kubrick went on to say, "I only want people working on this one that no one else will hire, or if they hired them, would never dream of hiring them again." Herr claimed that this was standard Kubrick hyperbole because he always had to have the best of the best. Side note, Kubrick told Herr that he thought that The Godfather had the best cast and was possibly the best movie ever made.
The casting is extraordinary here. The actors really inhabit what they're doing. They make their roles themselves, not the opposite way around.
Kubrick is often known for his thematic ambiguity, but his ambiguity also seemed to extend to the way he directed his actors. He would have the actors figure things out for themselves, breaking with the assumption people have about him being a dictator. Instead, he would take on the role of the audience and quote-unquote taste machine.
They should only do it when they say, "This is my gun," and then let go again. "This is for fighting, this is for fun."
He wouldn't talk about the story or specifics or use metaphors in his direction. After all, everyone had read the script, and he had worked very hard in the casting process to make sure that he found the right person to not only perform their role, but to build their role. Kubrick didn't know how to act, and he would step aside to let the performer who is thinking only about acting do their job, and he would be there as the eyes of the audience.
He would just say, I need this. I need it to be better. I need it to be faster. This is not working. You guys have to make this work. That's what you're here for. Make it work. Every once in a while, it would almost sound like a complaint where he would say something like, well, you just don't understand the scene. The scene is not about that at all. And, it would just make us think like, well, if it's not about that, then what is it about? And then eventually, luckily, we would figure it out. But he very rarely said anything. There's only a couple times where he gave you hints, strong hints, but,
This meant taking the necessary amount of time and takes to allow the actors to develop their performance into something that Kubrick found interesting. Malcolm McDowell, who played Alex in A Clockwork Orange, said that he once asked Kubrick about his character, and Kubrick basically told him, "I'm not an acting coach." It was important to Kubrick that the actors bring in their own ideas and use their craft to make the performance work. They had to figure it out for themselves. Kubrick wouldn't let any of the actors lean on him for how things should be done. And this goes for leaning on others as well. Michael Herr spoke about visiting the set, saying, "When I went to the set, the actors would come over to me between takes, search my face for a clue, confused and half mutinous, and then Stanley would walk by and say something like, 'Don't talk to my actors, Michael.'"
Stanley wasn't afraid to follow characters anywhere, but he would never draw any conclusions about their behavior.
Part of why Kubrick was able to spend so much time getting the performances right was that he used much smaller crews than you'd find on a typical movie production. Kubrick often worked with relatively small crews so that he could shoot fast and fluidly, and everyone on the set was allowed to give ideas. They could try things out on the fly as needed. Kubrick would give the cast the opportunity to bring their own personalities to their characters. He had all of the Marines besides Joker come up with what would be drawn and written on their characters' helmets. Joker had to have Born to Kill for the story, but everyone else was able to write and draw what they wanted. Adam Baldwin thought it would be cool to write "I am become death" from the Bhagavad Gita, which had been quoted by J. Robert Oppenheimer after the first atomic bomb test. Kubrick expected every actor he cast to bring their own creativity to their roles, but he decided what worked and what didn't. Kubrick famously said, "I don't always know what I want, but I do know what I don't want."
He doesn't want to explain to an actor what he's looking for. He's already cast you. And anything you bring is good enough for him if it tells his story properly. If it doesn't, he'll say, do it better. Do it more interesting. He does use those terms. He doesn't say how to do it, what to do. You fucked up, do it again. He'll say it right to you, right in front of everybody, no problem.
In an interview with Francis Kleins, Kubrick said, "I found over the long period of time which it takes to make a movie, that your own sense of whether you think it's good or bad or how happy you are at a particular time is very unimportant, that the ideas just come and sometimes they seem to come out of some place that's got nothing to do with how you feel." Douglas Milsom summed up this concept, saying, "Stanley has always done many, many takes, but in fact the many takes are not just repetitions of the same thing. They are often building upon a theme or idea that can mature and develop into something quite extraordinary. The whole structure of the scene can actually change during the operation of filming it. Also, Stanley gets a lot more out of his actors after he works with them a lot longer. It's especially valuable in bringing out something in the actors who may not exactly be up to the part, but Stanley works on them jolly hard until they produce the goods. That's why he's so good with actors. In the end, he'll rehearse and rehearse them until they're word perfect. And when they've got the words perfect, then the rest has to happen. They then have to act. The large number of takes are used mainly to get something out of the actors that they're not willing to provide right away. When it came time for the Marines to do the Hue City interviews, a sequence Kubrick came up with, Kubrick asked Modine to look for some good lines to incorporate in The Short Timers, the book the movie was based on. That's where Modine found,
"I wanted to see exotic Vietnam, the jewel of Southeast Asia. I wanted to be the first kid on my block to get a confirmed kill."
According to Vincent D'Onofrio, Arliss Howard came up with all of his lines in this scene.
"They don't have one horse in Vietnam. There's something basically wrong with that."
Co-screenwriter Michael Herr had been a combat correspondent during the Vietnam War. He said, "The characters in Full Metal Jacket were a lot like the ones I knew in Vietnam. They were the real thing. They're a lot truer than the characters in Platoon. In Platoon, they keep spouting Vietnamisms. the kinds of things Davy Crockett might have said, a pioneer language. In my opinion, Stanley succeeded completely in condensing the book into its essential elements. The scene in which we first meet Animal Mother unfolds differently in the script than what we see in the final film. Originally, Joker points his rifle at Animal Mother's neck and says, "Look man, I got twice as many hours in country as you, and if you don't get out of my face, I'll fucking blow your brains out." In his Full Metal Jacket diary, Matthew Modine wrote that this scene wasn't really working in the rehearsal stage, and Kubrick asked to meet with him in his trailer. Kubrick asked Modine if he had ever met anyone like Animal Mother, and Modine said, "Lots of them." Kubrick asked what he would do if someone like Animal Mother came up to him and got in his face, and Modine replied, "I'd make a joke," going on to say that tough guys like that are just a lot of talk, and a joke would diffuse the situation.
He goes, "Oh, that's interesting. Did you read any jokes in the book that we might be able to use in this?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And so Stanley and I were drinking that really strong African coffee, flipping through Gus Hasford's book and trying to find something. And I said, "You know what would be really great is if I could use one of those John Wayne things." And we found that one in the thing.
"Well, Pilgrim, only after ya eat the peanuts out of my shit."
and so that was one of those times when we massaged the script into something else that suited, where Stanley was really good with actors and feeling the freedom to say, "Okay, look, this is stupid. It's not working," without saying stupid though. "This isn't working. Let's change it. Let's make it something that fits me."
The idea here, as Modine writes, is that this is a typical confrontation between two punk-ass kids, but the difference is that they have guns and Animal Mother has killed many times. Now, I've always found the acting in this scene weirdly fascinating. The lines and delivery are so bizarre, like nothing you'd expect from a serious movie. Modine said, "There's something really weird about the performances, I think, in the film. There's something, but I think that was part of what Stanley was trying to do. There's a line in the film, the phony tough and the crazy brave, and I think that could sort of be what you could say about the performances in the film. There's kind of this phony tough and crazy brave. And it was so interesting to find out that this was a scene that was very difficult to get right. Remember when Vincent D'Onofrio mentioned that Kubrick took 2 days to work with one actor on one scene? Well, I believe that it was this scene with Adam Baldwin as Animal Mother. They shot the Vietnam half of the movie first, while D'Onofrio watched. The story goes that Kubrick had Baldwin do his lines over and over and over, take after take after take. Modine wrote in his diary that Kubrick wasn't hearing the lines like he imagined, and Baldwin delivered the lines a dozen different ways. Finally, in frustration, Baldwin muttered, "Oh man, what does he want?" And everyone went silent, and then Kubrick leaned over from behind his camera and said, "How about some better acting?" And the cast and the crew were like...
And to be fair, the scene wasn't working. I was sitting right next to Stanley while it was going on and feeling bad for everybody, but the scene wasn't working.
Right.
Yeah.
It could be very frustrating doing take after take without any idea what Kubrick was looking for. Kubrick would say things to Modine like, Matthew, you're not going to do it that way, are you?" Or, "What was that? You did it different that time. Why?" Kubrick didn't want the actors to quote-unquote make choices and do something different just for the sake of it. When it would happen, he would tell Modine to do it again, but don't do his choice. During the production, Modine wrote in his diary, "It's not that my choice was wrong, it's that he's looking for something else. I have no idea what, and I don't think he knows what. It's not a thing, it's an intangible feeling, but I think that's what it is. Having no idea what. Not thinking, that by repetition I might find myself hypnotized into being, not acting. That the whole process of acting is a journey toward being. Choices can't be right if you're making them. Choices are conscious. Stanley's actors have to act as unconsciously as an eye blinks, as uncontrollable as a heartbeat. This takes time. When Stanley told me he did a lot of takes because actors didn't know their lines, he wasn't talking about words. Modine spoke to Vivian Kubrick after publishing his diary. Vivian wondered if the only people who could really understand Kubrick were other artists who have, quote, suffered to make themselves understood. When the production finally wrapped, Arliss Howard went over to say goodbye to Kubrick.
And he said, yeah, well, Stanley, I'll see you later. And Stanley said, you're going to miss me. And Arliss said, yeah, I will. I'll miss you. He goes, no, you're going to really miss me. When you're working on a set, and the director calls cut. We got it. Let's move on. And you're going to know that you don't have it and that we shouldn't move on. And you're going to miss me because you know that I would never cut and say let's move on unless I knew we had it. And you're going to miss me. And Arliss said the first time that he went to work on another film and the guy said, cut, we got it, let's move on. He said, I really miss Stanley.
I want to take a moment to thank this episode's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service tailor-made for cinephiles like you. Mubi features a lineup of great films, handpicked by experts, non-algorithm, that take you on a guided journey through the best that cinema has to offer, with a new film added every single day. What's really cool is how Mubi curates the releases into retrospectives, specials, and specific subgenres. It's like having your own personal film festival that you can stream anytime, anywhere. Check out Alejandro Jodorowsky's bizarre cult classic El Topo, following an outlaw who challenges the invincible four masters of the desert for the love of a woman. Perhaps the most important acid western, El Topo can often be seen featured at indie theaters' midnight movie events. Or check out the classic cyberpunk anime Ghost in the Shell, following a cyborg officer investigating a master hacker called the Puppet Master. Ghost in the Shell would be a major influence on other science fiction masterpieces like The Matrix. All of this and much, much more are available right now on Mubi. Try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/CinemaTyler. That's mubi.com/CinemaTyler for a whole month of great cinema for free. Or join CinemaTyler on Patreon at the $5 level and get extended access to Mubi as a perk. And head on over to Patreon where you'll find a commentary track based on this video. Thanks for watching.